Hi, happy Thursday. Welcome back. It's Thursday, April 9th, 2020. And today is our last day of e-learning for this week because tomorrow starts spring break. Yay! But even though tomorrow starts spring break, I think I might come back. I looked ahead and saw that if I read 2 chapters today, then there's only 2 chapters left in our story. And I don't think you want to wait a whole week to hear how the story ends. So I will be back here tomorrow, and I hope you come and join us. But let's get started for today. Reading from 8 Class Pets plus 1 Squirrel divided by 1 Dog equals Chaos by Vivian, Vande. Today's first chapter is Nancy, Art Room Turtle. Call me Nancy. Sometimes people who come to visit Mrs. Hinkle's room get confused. They ask, "Is he a turtle or a tortoise?" Mrs. Hinkle says Nancy is a she, not a he, and she is a turtle. Mrs. Hinkle and we think there's a big difference between turtles and tortoises. We can't see how people get confused. By the end of the year of art class, Mrs. Hinkle's students will never again be the kind of people who get confused by this. Tortoises live on dry land, but we turtles spend most of our time in the water. But sometimes we like to have dry land to crawl up on. My beautiful glass cage has both, along with a nice heat lamp to keep me warm. Nice and warm and cozy. I'm sorry. I fell asleep there under the lamp. Where was I? Oh yes, I am a mud turtle, so I'll never grow bigger than 6 inches. This makes me the right size for Mrs. Hinkle to sometimes take me out of my glass case and set me on the table so the boys and girls can see me better. Don't poke at Nancy, or try to pick her up, Mrs. Hinkle says. She's very shy. It's nice to have someone else around to explain that you're not unfriendly, but only shy. Mrs. Hinkle teaches art. Even though I'm shy, I like that the children ask if I can come out of my case so they can use me as a model. Mrs. Hinkle gives me a piece of melon or lettuce to munch on so that I will stay still and not explore the table too much while my picture is being drawn. I like to have my picture drawn, but I also like to draw my own pictures. Sometimes Mrs. Hinkle pours food coloring onto a piece of foil and lets me walk through it. Then she sets down a piece of art paper and I walk onto that, leaving colored footprints with my little webbed feet. We don't put paint on a turtle's shell, Mrs. Hinkle says, but a little bit of food coloring won't hurt Nancy's feet. One afternoon, after waking up from a nap and finding that all the children, and Mrs. Hinkle too, had left, I was admiring all the new pictures Mrs. Hinkle had hung up that day. The children had been very excited and had talked about the artist who would be visiting the next day, an artist who was going from school to school to judge pictures and give out prizes for the best pictures. I think the best pictures are the ones with me in them. But all of a sudden, there was a commotion in the hall. So I pulled myself into my shell in case there was danger. Good thing, because the noise came into the classroom. A dog was barking, a parrot was squawking, a squirrel was shouting, "Help, help! The nasty, smelly dog wants to eat me!" And a hamster, a rabbit, and a rat were yelling, "Run, Twitch, run!" The wheels of the cart the dog was pulling went squeak, squeal, and the fish in the tank on the cart were yelling in their tiny fish voices, "School, school!" Even though my head was tucked safely inside my shell, I could see well enough to see that Twitch must be the squirrel, since the others were telling Twitch to run, and it was the squirrel who ran up on one of the tables where Mrs. Hinkle keeps her art supplies. The dog jumped up there too. So much energy, it nearly wore me out to watch them. Twitch leaped off the table and over to the bookshelves, pulling himself up by Art in Western Civilization. And the dog couldn't follow because the rope that tied him to the leg of the cart wasn't long enough. The dog ran back and forth on the table, knocking over plants and brushes and a box of chalk. The paint was leaking and dripped over the edge of the table, making a puddle on the floor. I liked the slow, thick way the paint dripped. Dripped. Where was I? Oh, yes. I recognized Twitch since sometimes I'd seen him look into the window of the classroom. Still, because I'm shy, I'd never talked to him before. But now that he was in danger, I wanted to help. It's scary when someone wants to eat you. I called over, "Excuse me, Mr. Squirrel, sir." This was very abrupt of me. Turtle manners call for long and slow and proper introductions. But this was an emergency. I said, "Don't you have a hard shell you can escape into?" "Nope," Twitch said, springing from one bookcase to another. "Just fur." Fur is not nearly as useful as a hard shell. I asked, "Do you have a stink gland?" "Don't I wish?" Twitch bounded from the bookcase to Mrs. Hinkle's desk to her chair to the floor. My goodness, could he move fast? The dog could move fast too, but when he jumped off the art table, his fish tank cart swung around and knocked into my table. My case tipped. I pulled all the way into my shell again. My case teetered. I closed my eyes. My case tottered. Over the edge and onto the floor my case went, landing on its side. I rolled right out of it. By the time I decided I was still alive, Twitch had already escaped into the hall. The dog, still attached to the cart, ran out of the room with the parrot flapping her wings at him, and the hamster, the rabbit, and the rat scurrying pretty fast too. The dog had left a trail of painted footprints from the table to the floor. It was mean of him to want to eat Twitch, but I do have to say, he was a very talented artist. I decided to follow. Our next chapter is Angel, 5th grade corn snake. Sassafras. Isn't that an absolutely delicious sounding word? I simply love saying sassafras. Society also has succulent syllables, as does suspicious. The society I'm in is Mrs. Shaughnessy's 5th grade class. Suspicious is how outsiders sometimes react to me because I'm a snake. They say I'm sneaky and slithery and have slimy skin. Sneaky and slithery, yes, but stroke my skin and see, I'm not the slightest bit slimy. I have no fangs, no venom. I'm a simple orange and black and red corn snake, as long as a 5th grader is tall. Mrs. Shaughnessy's syllabus is history. Sassafras. History is such an interesting subject, besides being an amusing thing for a snake to say. History. After classes, I'm somewhat solitary. A squirrel sometimes peeks in the window, but he slinks down again as soon as he spies me. Doesn't he know he's too substantial a mouthful for a snake my size to swallow? Only once a week I sup, mostly on frozen mice supplied by Mrs. Shaughnessy. 6 out of 7 days I could be a safe associate to all other class pets, including the albino rat who sometimes scurries past my doorway fast, as though suspecting I would feast on him. It must be nice to have sensitive fingers to unfasten one's cell as one wishes and explore the school's silent halls. So I was pleased one afternoon after school when a ruckus spilled out down the hall and into Mrs. Shaughnessy's classroom. My tongue tasted a shift in the atmosphere. The squirrel and rat burst onto the scene, along with a hamster, another excellent word, and a rabbit. From the hall came the sounds of a dog snarling, "Leave me alone! This has nothing to do with you!" while the parrot squawked, "Ole, ole, keep away!" In the classroom, the hamster saw me and squeaked, "Yikes! This is the 5th grade, where the snake lives! Snake equals danger!" The squirrel tried to skedaddle and shoved the rabbit, who stood betwixt him and the door. But the rabbit snapped, "The snake's locked up, but the dog isn't. You're safer in here." So the squirrel hastened for the higher ground instead. Up the window blinds he scurried, though they swayed beneath his weight and smacked against the glass. From there, it was a short distance to the long, narrow tube above the blackboard where the historic maps are scrolled. The squirrel paced back and forth above medieval Europe and Renaissance cities. From the hallway, we caught occasional glimpses of the dog as he sprinted from classroom to classroom, trying to escape the parrot's beak. For some reason, I could not discern the dog was towing a fish tank on the pushcart, and from a slight distance, a sociable but slow-moving voice called down the hall, "Hey guys, don't move so fast!" In Mrs. Shaughnessy's classroom, the nervous hamster ran around in circles and said, "That turtle carries her shell around with her for protection. Protection against dogs, protection against snakes. Could we make some sort of shell for Twitch?" The rabbit was looking at the shelves where Mrs. Shaughnessy keeps her supplies, including the large, lidless snake transport box. The rabbit suggested, "Or a shell to cover the dog?" I deciphered the rabbit's scheme. I myself do not like dogs who snip and snarl and sometimes eat a poor harmless snake who has no poison to protect himself. So I said, "I could help." The squirrel had misstepped and was dangling from the cord that lowers the maps. "How?" he asked. "By eating me before the dog has a chance to?" "I've had frozen mice this week," I said. "My stomach is satisfied till Tuesday." They all said, "Yuck!" "Set me free," I said. "I'll distance the dog while some of you push that snake transport box off the shelf. Timed just right, it should tip over the top of him and hold him safe from eating any of us. I would never be discourteous as to snack on schoolmates, except perhaps on Tuesdays. Besides, history teaches us that we are stronger with allies." "Allies," the rat repeated, "like a fish in a school." "Trust," I encouraged him. The rat, fearless, steadfast rat, scurried into my enclosure and shoved the screen aside. But then the dog ran in, still attached to his cart, snarling, "Where's that less than worthless squirrel?" The squirrel tried to scamper back up the cord, unscrolling Renaissance cities till Florence was on the floor. The blue and gold macaw flew into the classroom and squawked, "Signor Dog's on the loose, so move your caboose. Everyone to your places, pretend you're at the races." No one told the bird her meter was off. I slid it onto the floor. Seeing me, the dog scuttled and reversed. If he could have scaled up his fish cart, I suspect he would have. He didn't notice the squirrel, the rat, and the hamster climb onto the shelf and begin shoving at the snake transport carton. The macaw saw and went to their support. The box moved closer and closer to the edge of the shelf. I hissed, poison is ferocious, causing the dog to back up closer and closer to the overhang of the shelf. The rabbit thumped her back leg, and the vibration was the last assistance that suspended receptacle needed. Over the edge, the snake transport tipped, showering pine shavings on all. But the fit and our timing were flawless. The box landed just so to trap that dog, but not the cart inside. "Sassafras," I said. And that's where we'll end today, but we'll be back tomorrow to finish our story. Thanks for joining us today. See you tomorrow. Bye.